So as I said last week, hopefully we're gonna conclude hallucination theory today, in which to me the the final message that Kardec leaves to us here is the doctrine of spiritism, more particular its scientific aspect, does not reject, does not conflict any other science. But the other way is not true. That spiritism will be the first one to say, yes, there exists, hallucination exists. Yes, exists a lot of phenomena that can be explained through science, or if cannot be explained to science, it's not uh, a necessarily spiritual phenomenon. What spiritism will bring is to add the spiritual phenomena, is to add the mediumship, is to put one more field of understanding for us to better understand ourselves and everything that happens, all the phenomena to happen with us and around us. And there is no reason to reject it, especially when there is plenty of evidences, as we're going to read in the next part that we're going to start now, that the spiritual phenomena does exist. So Kardec goes through a bunch of things, say how spiritism collaborates with science to explain things that our physical science alone will not be able to explain. And one of the things is hallucination. Another thing is dreams. Explain only spiritism can truly and fully explain dreams, especially because it does not reject the dreams that are not of a spiritual cause, but add to it the spiritual causes of dreams. So to me, that is really, if I just stop right now here and conclude right here, that's what the point that Kardec is trying to make to us here. And now he's going to go into speak a little bit of in terms of memory. And the truth is, memory is one of the biggest challenge for our sciences still. I was going through some of the studies, the most recent studies of done in memory, and the truth is we are pretty lost to try to understand memory. A lot of the studies that have been done and been accepted for some time has been now be rejected because it's not the case. And it seems like when it seems to get somewhere that explain memory, some of the studies come back and bring us back to zero, and you have to start all over again. Because without the component of the spirit, the component of the perispirit, I don't think we'll be able to fully understand memory. Science is doing right now, trying to understand memory purely at the molecular level. And there's a lot of studies, a lot of money being put of trying to understand memory at the biomolecular level on the brain. With some, good ideas. The spiritual does not reject none of them. The spiritual just wants to add the component of the perispirit and the spirit to the equation. And without that, I don't know if you will be able to explain memory really. So I'm sure there will be a lot of questions over here, and I'm sure they're not going to have answers for you guys. And I will be sincere over here, say I really don't know this. Okay?
Okay. Okay, so we begin. It is an accepted fact that the memory is the result of the impressions retained by the brain. But by what strange phenomenon is it that these impressions, so varied and numerous, are not to be confused with one another? That is an impenetrable mystery. But it is no more strange than the sound waves that crisscross through the air, but which retain their own distinctness. In a sound and well organized brain, These impressions are clear and precise. In a less favorable state, they are diluted and become confused. Hence the reason for the loss of recollection or the confusion of ideas. This seems less strange if one accepts, as in phrenology, a special distinction for each part or even for each fiber of the brain. The images transmitted to the brain by the eyes leave their impression on it, which enables one to remember a picture as if it was still present. Although this should always be regarded as an act of memory, since nothing is in fact seen. Moreover, in the state of emancipation, the soul can see the brain and find these images in it, especially those that have impressed it the most according to nature of the spirit's preoccupations or its inner dispositions. This is how it recalls the impressions of religious, diabolical, dramatic, or mundane scenes, as well as bizarre animal like figures that it had seen some time before in a painting or had heard about it in a story, because these also leave their impressions. Thus, the soul really sees, but it only sees a photographic image in the brain.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Very confusing, very
Yeah.
complicated, and very debatable. If someone with reason wants to debate this, I think it will come out with very good arguments and very logical, reasonable arguments to debate what's being said here. What Kardec or the spirits are telling us here is that we go through a lot of activities during the day. A lot of things happens to us during the day.
Mm.
Some of these things, of course, a lot of those things creates an impression, and that in that impressions, it's like a photography that sticks to the brain, and the spirit is able to look at the brain, takes off those images, those photos, and that is really what memory is. It makes a little bit of sense to me. I tell the truth, I'm struggling a lot with this because I can't imagine that the brain itself get impressed. The impression is something of the spirit. We spirits will be impressed or not, in my understanding. Okay, so the brain itself does not get impressed. The brain itself does not see anything. What sees us. The brain does the exercise of using the eyes to capture light and interpreted that light over there so the spirit can see. That's the way I do understand. And of course, in this physical world, the spirit requires physical eyes and physical brains in order to function in this environment that we are now. The same way that if you go inside of specialized robot into the depths of the oceans where everything is dark, we are fully dependent on that robot to see, to manipulate things, to do whatever. We are 100% dependent on that instrument. So we now, spirit here, are 100 dependent on this physical body to do the things that we need to do, to have the impressions that we have, to see, to hear, and everything else as an incarnated spirit. So to me, it's that created the problem right there and there. How does brain get impressed? I can't imagine being get impressed. To me, the spirit gets impressed. Okay. Um, so this photograph, these impressions that is photographed by the brain and that the spirit can retrieve later. To me, those impressions has to be imprinted there by the spirit because the spirit is one who really get impressed.
Mm.
And I know what I just complicated things even more over here. But I think that this part of memory is quite complicated, it is quite difficult, and it says that the soul really sees, but it only sees a photographic image in the brain. So it retrieves information for the brain in order to see, in order to create memories.
Mm.
We move on?
Hey, Elmo,
Yeah.
I agree with you because just remembering um, Missionaries of Light when Andre Luis describes everything that he's experiencing in other books as well. It's just a spirit seeing things, let's put that way, and thus for creates the memory, and with that memory, he was able to write all those books and for spiritans. And there's no brain active there. There's nothing physical. It's just a spirit that is impressed, and he has the memory to do everything else. So, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. I think the spirit's impressed, not the brain itself.
Yeah. Yeah, but back to Kardec also, remember that the topic here is the theory of hallucinations, and Kardec is trying to explain that those hallucinations may have a purely extra spiritual component in the sense that once they are imprinted in the brain, like this photograph is in the brain, later on, and I'm going to read this, in a state of some kind of trance, the brain is kind of, it's got an LP with a scratch that keeps playing the same note over and over again because there is a little problem with the brain right then and there. And since there is this photographic memory, whatever you want to call it, is in the brain can indeed create that image over and over and over again, which will be a hallucination that is purely of the brain, but not having a spirit there for certain. Because
Yeah,
again, we're talking about hallucinations here. There's a theory of hallucination. Kardec is explaining how the brain can repeat those images. But we're going to read that later on.
Mm.
thank you.
Okay. 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 The images.
In the normal state, these images are fleeting.
Okay. In the normal state, these images are fleeting and influential because all sections of the brain are functioning freely. During an illness, however, the brain is weaker and the normal equilibrium in the parts of the brain disappears. Only some of the parts remain active, while others are more or less paralyzed. This results in the permanency of certain images that are not erased, as they would be in the normal state regarding external affairs. This is a true hallucination and the main cause of ideas fixes.
Okay? So exactly what I'm sorry I anticipated there, because Kardec's now trying to explain how we could have brain or hallucinations that the genesis is right in the brain. When there is a little problem in the brain, and that's the point that I say, the spirit put is impressed, and the spirit impressions fixate those impressions in the physical brain. Now, if the physical brain has a little problem, something, it may keep retrieving those little um, images on the part of the brain that is working okay. So it's exactly the good part of the brain that keep causing the hallucination, while the other part of the brain is in a state of illness, whatever, and 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 does not function well. And the part that is functioning well keeps bringing about the same images over and over again, and it creates the state of hallucinations. Just in the moment, I need to close the door over here. Hold on.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's too much noise outside. All right,
Okay.
we can move on. More questions?
Okay. We'll continue. One can see that we have explained this phenomenon with a well-known physiological law, that of cerebral impressions. But it is also always necessary to take the soul's intervention into consideration. If the materialists have not yet been able to give a satisfactory solution for the phenomenon, it is because they have not wanted to believe in the soul. Thus, they will say that our explanation is erroneous because it is supported by a contested principle. Contested by whom? By them. However, it has been accepted by the great majority since humankind has existed on the earth. The denial by a few does not comprise a law. Has our explanation been satisfactory? We have provided it for what it is worth in the absence of some other. And if you wish, we might call it a simple hypothesis while awaiting something better. As it is, can it explain all the cases involving visions? Certainly not. But we challenge all physiologists to present one that, according to their exclusivist opinions, can explain all of them. However, when they proffer their sacramental words of overexcitation and heightened imagination, they actually pronounce nothing at all. So, if all the theories about hallucination are insufficient for explaining all the facts, it is because there is something more involved than hallucinations per se. Our theory will be incorrect if we applied it to all cases involving visions. However, because some would contradict it, it is correct insofar as it is applied only to certain effects. One, concerning the state of the spirit during sleep, see the Spirit's book, The Emancipation of the Soul. Till the sixth, okay. Sixth legend he sees, but it only sees a photographic image in the brain. In the normal state, these images are fleeting and
Are you
ephemeral.
going back there? No, you read that already. Don't worry.
I read that already. Yeah, I
Yeah,
Back.
finished.
we
Yeah, I
finished this
finished.
chapter. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so basically, Kazakh says what I have said in the beginning over here. The problem with the materialist theory is that they miss the opportunity to aggregate knowledge, to aggregate understanding for the comprehension of phenomena that happens to us, to happen to all of us or around us, that is missing the spiritual component. That is contested, and is contested by whom? Contested by a minority, materialists, okay, who do not see that there is truth in repetition. Every culture, they say over here, um, by them, however, it has been accepted by the great majority since humankind has existed on Earth. Just about every civilization on Earth, as much as I know, has an understanding, has the certainty more than just a belief that there is something extra physical, extra material, that something that is greater than extra physical, the extra material. And without having an understanding, accept this understanding, things like hallucinations, like dreams, they will not be fully understood unless we add the spiritual component to it. Um, the good thing now that you're going to a much better chapter, that it has a lot more to do with medium, applicable mediumship, so to say.
Yeah.
Um, we can go ahead and read, I guess.
Apparitions of spirits of the living. Bi-corporeality and transfiguration are two varieties of visual manifestations. As extraordinary as they might seem at first sight, it would be easy to realize through the explanations that may be given for them that they are not outside the order of natural phenomena. Both are based upon the principle that everything has been stated concerning the properties of the perispirit after death applies to the perispirit of the living as well.
Okay, so from this point on, everything that we relate in terms of mediumship of phenomena, as in the past, you must make sure that it happens through the action of the perispirit. And keep in mind that not only the discarnate spirits have a perispirit, every spirit have a perispirit, incarnate and discarnate. Right now we are a triad, spirit, perispirit, physical body. Once you lose the physical body, we spirit will have a perispirit. And all the phenomena of apparitions requires the action of the perispirit. And for the mediums who will see spirits and a mediumship phenomena, it's also going to see that spirit through the eyes of the perispirit, not the physical eyes. Okay, continue.
Okay, that's okay. We know that during sleep, the spirit partially recovers its freedom. That is, it isolates itself from the body. And it is in this state that we often have the opportunity to observe it. But the spirit of both the living and the dead always retains its semi-material envelope, which, for the same causes that have already been referred to, can acquire visibility and tangibility. There have been well-proven cases that can leave no doubt on this point. We will cite only a few examples that we know about personally and whose truthfulness we can guarantee. Additionally, everybody can consult their memory and add their own examples. Okay.
Okay, so now he's gonna give examples of by by corporeality, which means by to, and is and this of course is dealing with incarnate ones. So at the same time that I'm here talking to you,
Mhm.
my body is resting in my bed right now. So my wife can go to the room and see my body sleeping, and you guys can see me here talking. So this is by, not true corporeality, right? So it's when the spirit the spirit, the perispirit emancipates for the physical body and goes somewhere else and presents itself somewhere else. Okay?
Yes. Okay. 115. The wife of a friend of ours repeatedly saw entering her bedroom during the night, whether the light was on or off, a woman who sold fruit in the neighborhood and whom she recognized by sight, but with whom she had never spoken. This apparition left her very frightened, especially because at the time she knew nothing about spiritism and because the phenomenon frequently repeated itself. The woman was perfectly alive and was certainly asleep at that time of the night. However, while her physical body was at home, her spirit and fluidic body were in the other woman's house. What was the reason for this? We do not know. In this case, an experienced spiritist would have asked her what she wanted, but the idea never occurred to our friend's wife. The apparition always disappeared without the wife knowing how, and always after its disappearance, she would make sure that all the doors had been tightly shut and that no one could have possibly entered her room. This precaution proves that she was wide awake and was not fooled by a dream. On another occasion, she saw an unknown man in the same way. However, one day she saw her brother, who was living in California. She, his appearance was so real at first sight that she thought he had returned and wanted to speak to her, but he disappeared without giving her the opportunity. Later, she received a letter from him that proved he had not died. This woman was what may be called a natural seeing medium, but at that time, as we have already stated, she had never even heard of mediums. Mm.
Okay. So here you have examples of Bi-Corporeality in which this woman at night would see almost like strangers in a bedroom except for the brother. And of course the question that comes to us is why or what for? And Kardec trying to quickly guess that would ask that, it says we don't know. So we don't know why this woman was having almost strangers in her house. A woman who sells fruits that should even know the name of the woman, anything else, except for the brother. We could know come with a lot of hypotheses of why that happens, or the good spirits trying to alert her of her mediumistic abilities is one hypothesis. You can go to everything, and they're as good as anyone else or any other because we don't really know. And Kardec makes sure that he states that we don't know why these women have strangers coming to visit her at night in while the physical body was at rest. But he makes sure to point also that only happened when those individuals who emancipated from the physical body partially, only when that physical body was at some kind of rest that did not need the immediate cog- cognitive function of the brain to, and it was only kind of resting, so the spirit could take a break and go travel somewhere. And he is also careful to make sure that he could explain and prove that the woman was not dreaming, because that would be one possibility. Maybe the woman is dreaming. Maybe he's seeing those individuals in a dream. But here, Kardec points out that she's fully awake, so much so that right as those images goes away, she gets up and go make sure that all the doors are locked. If she was asleep, she would not do that. We don't do that when we are dreaming. We don't get up and do anything related with our dreams. We just continue to dream until the alarm goes and wake us up, unfortunately.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anna
Okay,
has a
questions?
question now. Anna
Sure,
has a question.
please.
Everybody. Hi,
Hi.
Elmo. Okay, let me see if I will find a way to explain this. So, so for the person to be able to see another person's spirit or very spirit, it needs to be a medium, right? Even regardless of that person, the spirit being alive or not, right? Is incarnate or not.
In the
But it needs, because, for example, sometimes it's a seeing medium, but sometimes you may just sense the smell of the person, for example, or so it depends on the medium's capacity, not necessarily not the spirit that is visiting, let's say it.
yes, like the case of this woman that happened repeatedly, and especially with kind of almost strangers, there is a very good clues that this woman is indeed what he calls a natural seeing medium, right? That's the term he used, yeah. natural seeing mediums. But it's also important to recall that we are all mediums, not ostensive mediums, but we all may experience in our lifetime a glimpse, a short moment, one time or another, of seeing an spirit, of discarnate, of incarnate. We may experience that in our lifetime, because indeed we are all mediums. We do not function as ostensive medium most of the time. This woman over here, by the explanation, by the spirits that we saw over here, she is likely an ostensive medium with the faculty of seeing medium. But you're right. Another medium may not be able to see, but may be able to perceive the thought, perceive the idea of the spirit, even the sense of smell, as you said, it's possible. There are the auditory mediums, the who hear, which is different than perceiving the thought. Those are two different things. We're able to hear with the mediums or the things of the spiritual world.
And just one more quick question. So the medium of physical phenomena, it is different from the medium that sees a seeing medium, as you're seeing, because we often see in our groups, the mediums are able to see the spirits, but the other mediums are not, or the other present are not. But the mediums of physical phenomena would be different, right? It would allow anybody present to see. Is that correct?
Yes, if it was a physical phenomena, there would be that perispirit of incarnate or discarnate that is making itself present would be, I'm going to use coated with ectoplasm provided by by a medium of physical effect, and everyone there would see, even João and I would see it, not only the mediums.
Okay.
Because it'd be seen by our physical eyes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. And that's a very good point. There's a very good distinction to be made here. Okay. If it is a physical phenomenon now, it does not require a mediumistic ability to see that spirit. Everyone will see it. That's what makes it physical, because we see with our physical eyes, we smell with our physical nose. Okay.
We also can have more than one medium seeing the same thing, right? Because we've seen cases like that.
Yes, that's another good point. Let's say in the mediumship meeting, okay? Let's say that we have 6 mediums in the same room. Only the mediums who are somehow integrated with that whole communication, even now it's not the medium who is giving the communication, but it's somehow participating somehow, will, if they have the abilities, they will see. But another medium may not be integrated, be concentrated, be preparing to have to give their own communication, and will not see anything. Or there may be 2 mediums seeing, participate in that event, but they will describe a different scene, because each one will be paying attention, or one will be guided to focus on a different thing. And although it's the same communication, they will report seeing something slightly different, because they are focused in something slightly different, or because they are being led to focus on something different by the spirits of the house, of course.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. 116. Another lady who resides out in the country was seriously ill. And one particular night at around 10, she saw an older gentleman from her city whom she had sometimes seen at social functions, but with whom she had no closer relationship. He was sitting in an armchair at the foot of her bed, and now and then would take a pinch of snuff. He seemed to be watching over her. Surprised at having a visitor at such an hour, she wanted to ask him why he was there, but the gentleman made a sign for her not to talk, but rather to go back to sleep. She tried several times to speak to him, but each time he repeated his silent recommendation, and she would fall back to sleep. A few days later, after she had recovered from her illness, she received a visit from the same gentleman. However, at a convenient hour, and actually in person this time, he was dressed in the same manner with the same snuff box and displayed the same mannerisms. Certain that he had visited her during her illness, she thanked him for the effort he had made. However, he was quite surprised and said that he had not had the pleasure of seeing her for a long time. The lady was familiar with spirit phenomena and thus understood what had transpired, but she did not wish to go into explanations and was content with telling him that it had probably just been a dream. Disbelievers will say that it was in fact a dream. Those know-it-alls who believe themselves to be enlightened individuals. However, it is a fact that this woman had been no more asleep than the other one. Was it a waking dream, or, in other words, a hallucination? That is the final catchphrase, the universal explanation for everything that they cannot comprehend. Since we have already sufficiently refuted this objection, we shall proceed on behalf of those who are able to understand us.
Okay. So again, for us who understand, believe in mediumship, and Kardec is concentrated on us, he gave up on the know-it-alls because they're also gonna come, always gonna come for this theory of hallucinations. That is the big part that will throw everything that they do not understand, that they cannot explain outside spirituality. Anything that happens, any phenomena, as you just finished that part of hallucinations, that the materialists cannot explain with our physical sciences and happens, and it's proved that it happens, they can just throw in this big pot, hallucination, hallucination, hallucination. For this case of this woman, who could give complete details of that man, how the man dresses, how the man uses his sniffing tobacco thing there, and then the man comes in and presents itself exactly the same way. For us, it's clearly that it was a Bi-Corporeality, that the man had presented to her in his while the body was at rest. He went to her house. Why? What's the relationship? She barely know him, had seen him in a couple of occasions, and we do have this curiosity, as I'm going to say, why and what for? Is he some kind of healer? Is he helping her to get healed? It doesn't mention anything here, so I cannot extrapolate and create anything that is not here. But I know our minds like, why? Why is there? Did he help her get better? Was he doing a treatment for her? All those questions come to my mind. But again, it's not in the book. It's not explained to us, so I cannot add anything to it. Okay, questions, comment?
So just to clarify, to be this phenomenon of bicorporeality, the spirit has to be seen by a living person, right? Another incarnate person. It's
Not
not like,
necessarily.
for example, you leave your body here and then you're gonna do work and have to help other people in the spiritual realm. It has to be do something on with another incarnate spirit, right?
Let's assume that this woman have no mediumistic ability of seeing spirits. Would you say that the bicorporeality did not happen because she did not see it?
I think still will happen in
Right,
terms of the result, but not her seeing what happened.
right. So the phenomenon still happens. It's just not documented because there was not a seeing medium present to document that phenomena. You know, it's the silly question, right? If a tree falls in the middle of the forest, there's nobody there to hear it. Does it make a sound? You know, it's silly. It's cheap philosophy. Of course, it makes a sound. Just because there is no ears around there, it means that the air did not create that sound. Yes, it did. What is the meaning? If the sounds only existed for human ears? No, sounds is a physical phenomenon. So the bicorporeality is a spiritual phenomenon that happens if there are individuals who are able to document it or not.
Okay, so
Now you bring a good point, is that if I leave my body at rest, I go into the spiritual world to do works in the spiritual world, is that bicorporeality? No, it's not.
there you go. That's what I was thinking.
No, it's not.
It has to be, the work has to be done here on
Here,
what
yes.
here. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, so two good points, two good things there, yes. Because we all go into the spiritual world, and the world in the spiritual world are very not likely to do much stuff here in the physical world. But if you do, perhaps we do, um, if there is no one over there who is a seeing medium, perhaps we'll not notice, and that it's not going to be recorded or documented because there's nobody to do it, to record or to document it.
Thank you.
Okay. 117. Here is a more characteristic case, and we would be curious to see if it can be explained away as being a simple play of the imagination. A certain gentleman who lived out in the country never wanted to marry despite his family's entreaties. They were particularly insistent that he met a young lady from a neighboring city whom he had never seen. One day while in his bedroom, he was surprised at the presence of a young lady dressed in white with a wreath of flowers around her head. She told him that she was his bride and extended a hand to him, which he took in his own and noticed a ring on it. A few moments later, she vanished. Surprised at this apparition and certain that he had been wide awake, he tried to find out if anyone had come during the day. He was told that no one had visited the house. A year later, he yielded to the renewed entreaties of a relative and decided to go see the lady who had been recommended to him. He arrived on the day of
Corpus
Corpus Christi. Everybody was returning from the procession, and one of the first people he saw upon entering the house was a young lady whom he recognized as the one who had appeared to him earlier. She was dressed in the same clothing because the day of the apparition had also been on Corpus Christi. He was astonished, and the girl herself cried out in surprise and fainted. When she recovered, she explained that she had already met this gentleman on the same day a year earlier. They were married. That was in 1835. At the time, no one knew about spirits, and furthermore, both were extremely practical and possessed of less heightened imagination than most. One would probably say that both had been preoccupied with the idea of the proposed union and that this state provoked hallucination. However, one must not forget that the future husband had remained so indifferent in the manner that a whole year passed without his going to see his future bride. Even if we accepted the hallucination hypotheses, we would still have to explain the similarities between the double apparitions, the coincidence of the dress, the day of Corpus Christi, and finally, the fact that two individuals who had never met physically recognized each other, circumstances that could not have been produced by the imagination.
Okay, so this very last paragraph says everything that one could say about this case. It's almost funny that you or anyone would consider a double hallucination exactly identical of the two individuals. What is the probability of that? It's basically impossible with the richness of the details that they could bring to this. How could one had immediately recognized the other? Which is very interesting because on the first case of the man with the snuff box and the sick woman, the sick woman could recognize him, but he could not recall it, which makes completely sense because most of us does not remember our dreams or not remember with enough detail. But that's another proof that she was awake. She was completely awake because she was able to retain all that information in her physical brain. Now, in this case here, it's extremely interesting that the man was awake. Okay, we see that's easier, but the woman appeared to him in his bedroom. We have to accept that her physical body was not present, that her physical body was at rest somewhere else in her house, whatever. And upon her, the spirit and her spirit return to the physical body, were able to bring all those informations to the physical brain. And she was able to remember so much so that she fainted at seeing that man. There is no way that it could use hallucination as an explanation for this. If it was just one, perhaps we could, but both of them, it becomes pretty hard to use hallucination as the cause. I find this particular case very, very interesting, where both are able to recall it. Okay, common questions?
Yeah, sometimes we try to find difficult explanations for simple facts, right? You know, the explanation is very, very simple, but because we don't want to believe, we try to create fantasies.
Yeah, I keep imagining how much it's our pride takes a hold and hold us hostage to our own ignorance. Because to reject something so obvious is just our pride is screaming out loud to say, I don't care what the truth is, I stick with my point.
it's the lack of our ability to be open to different perspectives, right?
Accept something new, to be open to another way of seeing things, or at
Yeah.
least considering it.
Yeah, to go with an open mind, to without preconception, which is exactly how Kardec came upon Spiritism, right?
Yeah, and that's why you see that the most simple or more primitive people, they had no problem in understanding, accepting spirituality, because they lack that pride that corrupt the ability to seeing the obvious.
Now, this phenomenon is different than one that sometimes you experience, that you been in a certain place, you did something, or you say something that, and then you, oh, I think I've been here. I think I've said that before. This is a different thing, right?
Yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah. The deja vu is slightly different. But one thing is interesting in this case also that I question when that woman presented to him dressed and already showing wedding ring, I believe, was that seeing the future, seeing the past? Were they already a couple in the past and was about to reunite? Or that is premonition, seeing the future, and they both saw it? And again, I don't have an answer. Okay.
Okay. 118. Before proceeding any further, we must respond at once to a question that inevitably arises. How can the body remain alive while the spirit is absent? We will respond that the body is kept alive by its organic life, which does not depend on the presence of the spirit, like plants, which are alive but have no spirit. We should also add, however, that during life, the spirit is never completely detached from the body, like certain seeing mediums. Spirits recognize the spirit of a living individual by a luminous trail that ends at the body, a phenomenon that never occurs if the body is dead, for then the separation is complete. It is by this connection that the spirit is warned, wherever it may be at the time, that it must return to the body, which it does at the speed of light. The result is that the body could never die during the spirit's absence, and that upon returning, the spirit will never find the door shut, as some romanticists have portrayed it in their stories meant to entertain people. Yeah.
All right. So you see, Kardec is very careful to cover, to go through everything. How is that possible that the body will remain alive when the spirit lives? Well, first of all, the spirit does not live completely, only partially. It remains united by a very flexible, we call a cord, but you know that it's at energy level, of course, right? It's an energy connection to the physical body, and can only happens when the body does not require any cognitive function. The body is at rest. The brain is doing its checkup and maintenance stuff, so the cognitive function is not really required, which allows the spirit to take off a little bit. And another thing is, don't worry about the spirit will not get lost, not find the body again. He's not gonna get in another dimension and never find that physical body again. This is things for science fiction. We know that in cases of abuses, okay, in case of abuses of past lives therapy, or drug abuse individuals may go into a trance and go through into the spiritual world and have a hard time returning to the body, but they do return to the body, but bring with them a lot more problems they when they left. So it's not something that it would provoke through, that would not induce chemically, that would not provoke any regressions without the proper assistance and a very well trained psychotherapist to perform those kind of things, because it could give a problems upon returning. But those natural biocorporeality happens, don't worry about, you find your body. At the moment that your body is at any kind of risk, let's say that, I don't know, even the house next is catch on fire, not even your house, the house next is catching fire, that you return to that physical body immediately and you get out of the house. Immediately, regardless of where you are. So that is not a problem. Okay? 1 minute for a question. Okay, so you make a final prayer.
Okay. So our spiritual benefactors, our guardian angels, and our teacher, our Christ, as we come to the end of our meeting with our hearts full of gratitude, we thank you. Again, as we gather here tonight with new technology and continuous learning and studying and understanding each moment of who we are, where we came from, and which way we're heading. We are so grateful, dear Father, for the aspiration, for the understanding, for the teachers that are so dedicated with us. We are so grateful and we thank you. And as we go on our day now, throughout the week, may we continue to keep ourselves focused with prayers for all our brothers and sisters in both worlds, to assist, to guide, and to help. With our prayers, may they find enlightenment and peace. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers and return again next week. We also pray, dear Father, for our SGNY, for the United States Spiritist Federation, for the United States Spiritist Councils, and all that have done so much for us. Our beloved teacher, Jusada, may God watch over her, protect and guide her. For all our families and loved ones, we thank you, dear Lord. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting tonight. So be it.